The mining station floated at the edge of known space where humans had only been for 3 years. Jake Miller worked as the station security chief, watching over 500 miners who dug rare minerals from asteroids. He was 30 years old, with brown hair and tired eyes from staring at security screens all day long. Life on the station was boring until the day everything changed. Jake was drinking his morning coffee when alarms started screaming across every deck. The main screen in the control room lit up, showing a massive ship that had appeared from nowhere. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, made of some material that seemed to shift between solid and liquid. The ship was 10 times bigger than their entire mining station and shaped like a flower with deadly thorns. Jake had seen many ships in his 5 years in space, but nothing like this. His hand moved to the communication button, but before he could speak, a voice filled the control room. The voice was female and spoke perfect English, but with something musical underneath, like every word was part of a song. She said her name was Princess Lyra of the Celestial Empire and demanded to know why humans were stealing from her territory. Jake looked at his crew, who all seemed frozen in fear. He cleared his throat and activated the communication system. Everyone expected him to beg or threaten or try to negotiate. But Jake had grown up in Texas, where his grandmother taught him that honey worked better than vinegar. So he leaned back in his chair and said, "Hey, sweetie, you could have just asked nicely." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Then something unexpected happened. The alien princess appeared on their screen for the first time, and she was nothing like Jake had imagined. Her skin was pale silver like moonlight on water. Her hair floated around her head in impossible ways, defying gravity. And her eyes were the color of nebulas swirling with purple and gold. But what shocked everyone was the expression on her face. The translator must have conveyed not just his words, but his tone, because Princess Lyra looked confused and something else. Her cheeks had turned a darker shade of silver, and she touched her face, like she felt something strange. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Finally, she managed to say, "Yes, darling," in a voice that sounded nothing like her earlier commanding tone. Her own crew behind her looked shocked, with their blue, scaled faces showing expressions of disbelief. Jake noticed one of them actually dropped what looked like a weapon. Jake stood up slowly and walked closer to the screen, treating this like he would approach a scared animal back on Earth. He kept his voice soft and easy as he explained that humans had not known this space belonged to anyone. They had found it empty and started mining because Earth needed these minerals to survive. Lyra listened without interrupting, which her advisors later told her was unusual because she never listened to anyone. She watched this human male with growing curiosity. He was not begging for his life or offering tribute like every other species did when meeting the Celestial Empire. He was just talking to her like she was a normal person. She had been alive for 200 standard years and had conquered 17 systems for her father, the Emperor. In all that time, no one had ever spoken to her with such casual warmth. Her whole life was about power and fear and expanding the empire. But this human was smiling at her, and somehow that smile made her feel strange inside. Jake explained that the mining station had families aboard, including children who had never seen Earth. They were not warriors or conquerors, just people trying to make a living in space. He offered to show her around the station if she wanted to see for herself that humans meant no harm. Her advisors immediately protested, saying it was obviously a trap. No princess of the Empire had ever set foot on such a primitive vessel. But Lyra found herself agreeing before she could think it through. She would come aboard with just 2 guards to inspect their operation. The crew of the mining station scrambled to prepare for her arrival. They had no idea how to receive alien royalty, so Jake told them to just be themselves. He stood at the airlock wearing his best uniform, which was still just a basic security outfit, with a coffee stain on the sleeve. When the airlock opened and Lyra stepped through, the artificial gravity made her stumble slightly. Jake reached out instinctively to steady her, and when his hand touched her arm, both of them felt something like electricity. Her armor, which was supposed to be impenetrable, actually flickered and showed patterns of light where he touched. She pulled away quickly, but not in anger, more in surprise as she looked at her arm where the patterns were still swirling. Her guards tensed, but she raised a hand to stop them. She looked at Jake, who seemed just as surprised as she was, and asked, "What did you do to me?" Jake held up both hands, showing he had no weapons, and said honestly that he had no idea, but asked if she was okay. The concern in his voice was genuine, and Lyra realized that no one had asked her that question in over a century. Everyone always assumed she was invincible. She nodded slowly and let him lead her through the station. As they walked, he pointed out different areas, explaining how the life support systems worked and showing her the small garden where they grew fresh vegetables. The normalcy of it all was foreign to her, but fascinating. They passed a viewing window where several human children were playing some sort of game with a ball when they saw Lyra. They did not run in fear, but pressed their faces against the glass to get a better look. One little girl waved, and Lyra found herself waving back without thinking. Jake laughed at that, and the sound was warm and real, not the forced laughter she heard in royal courts. She asked him why the children were not afraid, and he said that kids were curious about everything and everyone until adults taught them to be scared. That simple statement hit Lyra harder than any weapon could. Have she realized that her entire empire was built on teaching fear? The tour of the mining station continued for 3 hours, and Lyra found herself forgetting why she had come here in the first place. Jake showed her the mess hall where humans ate together, sharing food and stories. She watched them laugh and argue, and make up all in the span of one meal. Her people ate in silence, focusing only on nutrition. In the medical bay, she saw something that made her stop and stare. A human doctor was treating a patient who was clearly dying of old age in the Celestial Empire. The elderly were considered useless and left to fade away. But here the doctor held the old man's hand and spoke to him gently while giving him medicine to ease his pain. Jake explained that humans believed every life had value until the very end. Lyra wanted to argue that this was inefficient, but found she could not. The look of peace on the old man's face was something she had never seen in her own empire, where everyone died alone. They visited the recreation center where off-duty miners were playing various games. Some were exercising while others played cards or watched movies from Earth. Jake asked if she wanted to try something, and before she could refuse, he handed her something called a pool cue. He showed her how to play pool, which involved hitting balls into pockets with a stick. It seemed pointless to her at first, but when she managed to sink her first ball, Jake cheered and high-fived her. The physical contact sent those strange sparkles through her armor. Again, but this time she did not pull away. Her guards were growing nervous because their princess was actually enjoying herself. They had never seen her smile before, but now she was laughing when she missed an easy shot. Jake was patient and encouraging, teaching her without making her feel stupid for not knowing this simple game. As they played, Jake told her about Earth and how humans had almost destroyed themselves multiple times, but always found a way to survive and grow stronger. He talked about wars and peace and how humans learned that working together was better than fighting alone. Lyra listened carefully, filing away every word. She told him about her world where cities floated in the clouds and buildings sang harmonious frequencies that kept them aloft. Her people had conquered death itself with technology that could repair any injury or disease. But somehow, in gaining all that power, they had lost something essential. Jake asked her what she did for fun, and Lyra had no answer. Fun was not a concept in the Celestial Empire. Everything had a purpose, and that purpose was always about power or control. She realized that in 200 years, she had never done anything just because she enjoyed it. He seemed sad for her, which was strange because she was the one with all the power. She could destroy his station with a thought, but he felt sorry for her. Jake suggested they get something to eat and led her to the mess hall where the miners were having dinner. The moment they walked in, everyone went silent. Jake just waved and said, "Folks, this is Princess Lyra and she is our guest, so treat her nice." Then he got 2 trays and started putting food on them, asking her what she wanted to try. Lyra had never chosen her own food before. It was always prepared specifically for optimal nutrition. She pointed at things that looked interesting, and Jake piled them on her tray. They sat at a regular table, not a special one set apart, and within minutes the miners were talking again. One brave soul even asked her if her armor was heavy, and she found herself in an actual conversation with common workers. The food was strange, and some of it she did not like, but Jake just laughed and said that was normal. He ate some of her rejected items, saying, "Waste not, want not." When she asked what that meant, he explained how humans had learned to value things because they had experienced scarcity. After dinner, a small girl approached their table carrying a piece of paper. She held it out to Lyra and said she had drawn a picture. The drawing was crude, showing a silver figure next to a brown figure under what might have been stars. But the silver figure was smiling, and that made Lyra's chest feel tight. She carefully took the drawing and thanked the girl, who beamed and ran back to her parents. Jake watched this interaction with a soft expression and said, "Kids had a way of seeing past all the complicated stuff to what really mattered." Lyra folded the drawing carefully and tucked it into her armor. As the day ended, Jake walked her back to the airlock. Her guards looked relieved that she was finally leaving, but Lyra felt something she had never experienced before, which was reluctance to go. She turned to Jake and asked if she could come back tomorrow. He smiled that same easy smile and said, "Hey, sweetie, you are welcome here anytime." The phrase made her cheeks flush silver again, and she responded, "Yes, darling," before she could stop herself. The watching miners tried to hide their smiles, but she saw them anyway. Back on her ship, her advisors demanded to know what had happened and why she had spent so long on the human station. They reminded her that she was there to remove the humans from their territory and take the mining rights for the Empire. But Lyra was looking at the drawing the little girl had given her. She made a decision that shocked everyone, including herself. She announced that the humans could continue mining, but they would share the profits with the Empire. It was unprecedented because the Empire never shared anything they just took. But something about these humans made her want to try a different way. Her lead advisor protested, saying the Emperor would be furious. When he learned of this arrangement, Lyra knew he was right, but for the first time in her life, she did not care. She wanted to see Jake again and learn more about these strange creatures who found joy in simple things. That night she could not enter her regeneration cycle, which was like sleep for her people. Instead, she stood at her viewing portal looking at the small mining station and wondering what Jake was doing. She thought about his laugh and the way his hand felt when he touched her arm. She retrieved the drawing and studied it again, noting how the child had drawn them standing close together like friends. The concept of friendship was foreign to her, but she thought maybe that was what she felt toward Jake, which was impossible, because princesses did not have friends. The next morning, she sent a message to the station saying she would return for another visit. Her advisors tried to stop her, but she overruled them all. She put on lighter armor this time, something less formal and more practical, though she did not admit even to herself that she was trying to look nice. Jake was waiting at the airlock when she arrived, and his face lit up when he saw her. He said he was glad she came back because he had something to show her. He led her to a small observation deck that most of the miners never used because the view was not spectacular, just empty space. But Jake had set up 2 chairs and a small table with what he called coffee and donuts. He said this was his favorite place to think, and he wanted to share it with her. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars and eating the sweet earth food. She asked him why he was being so nice to her when she had threatened his people. He thought about it and said that where he came from, people believed in giving others a chance to be better than their worst moment. He saw something in her that maybe she did not see in herself yet. Lyra wanted to tell him that was foolish and naive, but the words would not come because sitting here with him eating donuts and watching stars, she felt more at peace than she had in 2 centuries. Days turned into weeks and Lyra visited the mining station every day. Her massive warship remained parked nearby, making everyone nervous at first, but eventually it became just part of the scenery. Jake introduced her to coffee, which her body processed differently than humans, making her incredibly energetic for hours. She started helping with repairs around the station, using her advanced knowledge to improve their systems. The miners were suspicious at first, but when she fixed the air recycler that had been breaking down for months, they started warming up to her. She worked alongside them, getting her hands dirty for the first time in her life. Jake taught her card games, and she was terrible at bluffing because her face turned silver whenever she tried to lie. The miners found this hilarious and even started a betting pool on how quickly she would give herself away. Lyra had never been laughed at before, but realized they were not mocking her. They were including her, one day an accident. happened in the mine when an asteroid shifted and trapped 3 workers. Jake immediately suited up to go help, but the passage was too unstable. Lyra did not hesitate. She used her armor's superior strength to hold up the collapsing tunnel while Jake pulled the workers to safety. Afterwards, the rescued miners thanked her with tears in their eyes. One of them hugged her, which was so unexpected that her armor flickered off completely for a second, revealing her true form underneath. She quickly reactivated it, but Jake had seen and his expression was soft and amazed. That night he asked her why she hid behind the armor all the time. She explained that showing weakness in the Empire meant death or worse. Jake touched her hand gently and said that here vulnerability was not weakness. It was what made people trust each other. She wanted to remove her armor right then, but centuries of training held her back. Instead, she asked him about his past and learned that he had lost his wife 3 years ago in a pirate attack, which was why he had come to the edge of space to forget. The pain in his voice made her chest ache. Without thinking, she reached out and took his hand properly this time. Skin to skin through a small opening she created in her armor's glove. The connection was intense, like touching a live wire, but neither of them let go. Jake's eyes widened, but he squeezed her hand gently. From that moment, something shifted between them. They still joked and said, "Hey, sweetie," and "Yes, darling." But now it carried real affection. The miners noticed and started making excuses to leave them alone together. Even her guards relaxed somewhat, seeing their princess happier than ever. Lyra began transmitting reports back to the Empire about the humans, but she left out many details. She mentioned their primitive technology and small numbers, but not their incredible resilience. She reported their simple weapons, but not their complex hearts. She knew she was betraying her duty, but could not stop. 1 month after her first arrival, a small human child became very sick. The station's medical equipment was not advanced enough to save her. Lyra watched Jake hold the girl's mother while she cried, and something inside the princess broke. She returned to her ship and came back with a healing device. Her advisors were horrified, as this technology was forbidden to share with lesser species. But Lyra placed the device on the child and watched as color returned to her small face. The mother collapsed with relief, and Jake looked at Lyra like she had hung the stars themselves. That night, the entire station threw a party to celebrate. Everyone wanted to thank Lyra, but she felt uncomfortable with gratitude. She had been raised to expect fear and obedience, not genuine appreciation. Jake found her hiding in the observation deck and sat beside her. He asked if she was okay, and she admitted that she did not understand humans. They should hate her for threatening them, but instead, they were kind. They should fear her power, but instead they invited her to dinner. It made no sense according to everything she had been taught. Jake said that humans had learned that hate took too much energy and kindness usually worked better. He told her about Earth's history, full of wars and pain, but also full of people choosing to be better than their worst impulses. He said humans were stubborn about hope, even when it seemed stupid. She asked him if he was not afraid of her at all. He thought about it and said he was afraid of what she could do, but not of who she was, because he had seen her true self when she saved those miners and healed that child. The person under the armor was not scary at all. She was lonely. The word hit her like a physical blow because it was true. She had been lonely for 200 years, surrounded by subjects and soldiers, but never equals. Never friends, never anyone who saw her as just Lyra instead of Princess of the Celestial Empire. Without planning to, she began to cry, which was supposed to be impossible for her species. The tears were silver, and when Jake wiped them away with his thumb, his skin tingled. He pulled her against him and held her, while she released centuries of isolation. Her armor automatically powered down when it sensed no threat, and for the first time Jake saw her completely. She was beautiful in an alien way, with silver skin that seemed to glow from within, and hair that moved like it was underwater. Her eyes were even more amazing up close, swirling with colors human eyes could never have. But what struck him most was how small she seemed without the armor, just a woman who had been carrying an empire on her shoulders since before humans had even reached space. He held her tighter and whispered that she was safe here. She could just be herself. She stayed in his arms for an hour, neither of them speaking. When she finally pulled back, her expression was determined. She said she needed to tell him something important. The Empire was not just going to accept this arrangement forever, and eventually they would come for her. Jake asked if she was in danger, and she nodded, saying that defying the Emperor, even as his daughter, meant death or reconditioning, which was worse. She had been buying time by sending false reports, but eventually the truth would come out, and when it did, both she and the humans would be targeted. He asked why she was risking everything for them, and she looked at him with those swirling eyes and said, "Because you showed me what it means to truly live." The Empire had given her power and immortality, but the humans had given her something more precious, which was the ability to feel. Jake made a decision that would change everything. He said that if the Empire came for her, then the humans would stand with her. They did not have advanced weapons or technology, but they had something else, which was the absolute refusal to give up on people they cared about. Lyra wanted to argue that it was hopeless, but looking at his determined face, she believed him. Humans had survived everything the universe threw at them through sheer stubbornness, and now they were prepared to face an empire for her, which was insane and beautiful and so completely human. She kissed him then, which was nothing like her people's formal touching of foreheads, but the messy, wonderful human way Jake had described her first kiss in 2 centuries of life, and it was with a human who had called her sweetie and changed her entire existence. When they broke apart, Jake was grinning and said that was worth whatever came next. Lyra found herself laughing and crying at the same time, and realized that humans had taught her to feel everything all at once instead of nothing at all. Her guards found them later still sitting together, watching the stars and holding hands. They reported back to the ship that the princess had been compromised by human influence, but Lyra did not care because for the first time in her life she was choosing her own path. The next morning, she made an announcement to both crews. She was officially requesting asylum with the humans and renouncing her claim to the Empire's throne. The silence that followed was deafening until Jake stood up and started clapping slowly. One by one, every human on the station joined in. Her advisors fled back to the Empire ship, which powered up and left immediately to report her treason. Lyra watched it go, knowing that she had just signed her own death warrant, but feeling freer than she ever had. The humans were now in terrible danger, but none of them looked afraid. Jake took her hand in front of everyone and asked if she was sure about this. She squeezed his fingers and said, "Yes, darling," with complete certainty the humans would face the Celestial Empire together. And somehow that did not seem impossible anymore, because humans had a way of making the impossible happen. The Celestial Empire fleet arrived 3 weeks later, 50 ships strong enough to destroy entire solar systems. Lyra stood beside Jake on the mining station's bridge, watching the fleet arrange itself in attack formation. Every human on the station had voted to stay and fight, even though they knew the odds. Jake had spent those 3 weeks preparing not weapons but messages. He had transmitted everything about Lyra and their story to every human colony and Earth itself. The response had been unexpected as ships started arriving. Not warships, but civilian vessels, news crews, medical ships, even cruise liners. By the time the Empire fleet arrived, there were over 300 human ships surrounding the tiny mining station. None of them were military, and most were not even armed, but they were there as witnesses. Jake called it the power of public opinion, which Lyra did not understand until she saw what happened next. The Emperor himself appeared on the main screen, his face cold and perfect like carved ice. He demanded his daughter return immediately to face judgment for her treason. The punishment would be reconditioning, which meant erasing everything she had become and starting over as an empty vessel. Jake stepped forward before Lyra could respond and said, "Hey there, Your Majesty, we need to talk about your daughter." The casual tone made everyone gasp, including Lyra. The Emperor had never been addressed so informally in 10,000 years of rule. The Emperor's eyes narrowed dangerously, but Jake kept talking. He said that Lyra had found something with the humans that the Empire had lost, which was the ability to choose her own life. He asked if a father who truly loved his daughter would want to erase her happiness. The Emperor laughed, which was a sound like breaking glass. He said humans knew nothing of love or power or the burden of empire. But Jake did something unexpected. He asked if the Emperor remembered the last time he had been happy. Not powerful or victorious, but actually happy. The question seemed to confuse the Emperor, and in that moment of silence a small voice spoke up. It was the little girl Lyra had saved with the healing device. She said that Lyra was nice and helped people and should not be punished for being good. Other humans started speaking up, telling stories of how Lyra had helped them over the past weeks. The miners talked about her fixing their equipment and working beside them. The families mentioned her playing with their children. The medical staff described her tireless efforts to improve their facilities. Then something unprecedented happened, as one of the Empire fleet captains spoke up. He said he had been watching the princess and had never seen her show such purpose before. Other voices from the Empire ships joined in, admitting they had questions about their way of life. The Emperor raised his hand for silence, and everyone obeyed. He looked at his daughter, who was standing tall without her armor in simple human clothes. Her hand was linked with Jake's, and she met her father's gaze without flinching. For the first time in centuries, she was not afraid of him. He asked her if she truly chose these primitives over her own empire and eternal life. Lyra said she chose feeling over numbness, purpose over power, and love over fear. She said the humans had given her something the Empire never could, which was the freedom to be herself. The Emperor's expression changed to something unreadable. He asked Jake what made him think he was worthy of a princess who had lived for centuries. Jake replied that he did not think he was worthy, but he loved her anyway, and would spend whatever time he had trying to deserve her. Love was such a foreign concept to the Empire that the universal translators struggled with it, but every human watching understood, and their ships moved closer together in solidarity. They were not threatening anyone, just standing together the way humans always did when it mattered. The Emperor demanded proof that this human emotion was worth destroying an empire, for Jake looked at Lyra and asked if she trusted him. When she nodded, he did something that shocked everyone. He invited the Emperor to come aboard the station alone and see for himself. Every advisor and general in the Empire fleet immediately protested. No emperor had ever set foot on a lesser species vessel. But the Emperor silenced them all, and to everyone's amazement agreed. He would come alone and observe this human love himself. 3 hours later, the Emperor of the Celestial Empire walked through the mining station's airlock. He was taller than his daughter, with the same silver skin, but his eyes were cold and empty, where hers now sparkled with life. Jake offered his hand in greeting, which the Emperor ignored. Instead of being offended, Jake just smiled and said, "Come on, let me show you around." He led the Emperor through the station just as he had done with Lyra weeks before. But this time the miners did not hide. They went about their normal lives, showing no fear. In the mess hall, families were eating dinner together and children were laughing. In the medical bay, doctors were caring for patients with compassion. In the recreation area, people were playing games and making music. The Emperor watched it all with an expression of confusion. They ended up in the observation deck where Jake had first shared coffee with Lyra. The Emperor stood at the window looking at the stars while Jake poured 3 cups of coffee. When Lyra arrived, she hesitated before sitting between them. The Emperor finally spoke, saying he had ruled for 5,000 years, and in all that time he had never seen his subjects show such genuine emotion. He had believed that feelings made species weak, but these humans seemed to draw strength from them. Jake said that humans had learned that connections between people were what made life worth living, not power or control or even survival, but the bonds they formed with each other. He said that Lyra had become part of their community, and they would protect her because that was what families did. The Emperor turned to his daughter and really looked at her for the first time in centuries. She was glowing with an inner light that had nothing to do with her alien biology. Her face showed more expression in one moment than it had in 200 years of perfect control. He asked her if she was truly happy, and she said yes, more than she had ever thought possible. He asked if she understood that choosing this meant giving up immortality, and she said that a short life filled with love was better than an eternity of emptiness. The Emperor was quiet for a long time, then did something that made history. He removed his own ceremonial armor and sat down in a human chair. For the first time in 5 millennia, he looked vulnerable and tired. He picked up the coffee cup and took a sip. He said that perhaps the Empire had been wrong about humans. They were not primitive, but had simply chosen a different path. They valued things the Empire had forgotten even existed. He looked at Jake and said, "Take care of my daughter, or I will destroy your entire species." Jake grinned and said, "Hey sweetie, you hear that I got the dad talk from the Emperor of the Galaxy?" Lyra laughed and replied, "Yes, darling, but please do not make him destroy Earth." The casual exchange made the Emperor's mouth twitch in what might have been almost a smile. The Emperor stood and announced that Princess Lyra was hereby released from all obligations to the Empire. She could choose her own path, but she would always be welcome to return if she changed her mind. He also declared that humans were under Imperial protection as friends of the Crown. Before leaving, he did something that shocked even Lyra. He hugged his daughter. It was awkward and brief, but it was real. Then he looked at Jake and said that if humans could teach the Empire to feel again, perhaps there was hope for the galaxy after all. As the Emperor's fleet departed, news of what had happened spread across the galaxy. Species that had hidden for generations began reaching out to humans, wanting to learn about these emotions that had changed an empire. Lyra stood with Jake watching the ships leave and realized that she had not lost her father, but perhaps helped him find himself again. Jake put his arm around her and asked if she regretted her choice. She leaned into him and said, "Never." The mining station returned to normal, except now they had an alien princess working in maintenance and dating their security chief. The other human ships slowly departed but promised to stay in touch. Some of the younger members of the Empire actually requested permission to study with humans. 6 months later, Jake proposed to Lyra in the observation deck where they had shared their first coffee. She said yes before he even finished asking, and her joy lit up the entire room, literally, as her bioluminescence responded to her emotions. Their wedding was the first human-alien marriage in history and was attended by representatives from both species. The Emperor himself performed the ceremony, combining human and celestial traditions in a way that had never been done before. 2 years had passed since the wedding, and the mining station had transformed into something neither human nor celestial. But beautifully, both Lyra and Jake had moved into larger quarters decorated with earth plants that grew under alien light, crystals creating colors that existed nowhere else. The morning sickness hit Lyra like an asteroid, which was supposed to be impossible. Her species reproduced through genetic synthesis, not biological pregnancy. But somehow her body had adapted to Jake's human DNA and created something new. She stared at the medical scanner in shock. Jake found her sitting on their bed holding the scanner with silver tears running down her face. He immediately panicked, asking what was wrong, but she just handed him the device. When he saw the results showing a tiny life growing inside her, his legs gave out and he sat down hard. They were going to have a baby, the first hybrid of their two species. The medical officer, a gruff older woman named Helen, said she had no idea how to handle this pregnancy since it was literally unprecedented. But she promised to figure it out with help from both human and celestial doctors. The Emperor arrived within a week when he heard the news, bringing the Empire's best medical minds. They worked with human doctors to monitor Lyra carefully. The baby was developing in ways that amazed everyone, showing characteristics of both species, but also completely new traits. During the pregnancy, Lyra experienced human emotions at an intensity that sometimes overwhelmed her. She cried at videos of puppies, laughed until she could not breathe at Jake's bad jokes, and once threw a plate at the wall because the food printer made her sandwich wrong. Jake just held her through it all. The other miners became fiercely protective of her. Betty from engineering knitted tiny clothes, while Marcus from security assigned himself as her personal guard. The children on the station talked to her belly, telling the baby stories about both Earth and the Empire. 6 months in, they learned the baby was a girl. Lyra wanted to name her Hope, but Jake suggested something that honored both cultures. They decided on Luna, which meant moon in Earth languages and represented the silver light of Lyra's people. The pregnancy was not easy as Lyra's body struggled to adapt. Her temperature fluctuated wildly, and her bioluminescence would flare unexpectedly. Jake stayed by her side through everything, learning to read her alien vital signs better than any doctor. One night, she woke up screaming as the baby kicked for the first time. The sensation was alien to her species, who never felt their offspring before birth. Jake placed his hand on her stomach and felt the movement, too. His face lit up with wonder, and he started talking to Luna. He told their unborn daughter about Earth's blue skies and the Empire's singing cities. He promised to teach her to play pool and ride a bike even though they were in space. He said she would be special, not because she was the first, but because she was theirs. Lyra watched her husband talk to her belly and felt something she had no word for in either language. It was bigger than love, deeper than joy, and more powerful than any weapon. It was the feeling of creating a future that neither of their species had imagined. The birth happened during a meteor shower, which everyone took as a good sign. Lyra's labor lasted 18 hours, and she nearly broke Jake's hand squeezing. The hybrid nature of the pregnancy meant nothing went as expected, but Helen and the team adapted on the fly. When Luna finally arrived, she was perfect and impossible. Her skin shifted between human pink and celestial silver, depending on her mood. Her eyes were Jake's brown, but with swirls of Lyra's purple and gold. She had tiny fingers that gripped with human strength, and a voice that could harmonize with itself. The Emperor held his granddaughter for the first time and actually smiled, a real smile, not the political one he used for ceremonies. Luna grabbed his finger and her skin went full silver, matching his perfectly. He declared her the future of both species and officially recognized her as heir to the Empire. But Jake and Lyra just wanted her to be a happy child. She grew up on the mining station surrounded by both humans and celestials, who came to study the miracle of her existence. She learned to walk in artificial gravity and speak in both languages, often mixing them, in ways that made everyone laugh. By age 3, Luna was showing abilities neither species possessed. She could sense emotions from across the station and project feelings to others. When she was happy, the entire station felt lighter. When she had tantrum, circuits would overload and lights would flicker. Jake taught her human games and stories while Lyra shared celestial science and philosophy. Luna absorbed it all with a curiosity that reminded everyone of her parents' first meetings. Waiki asked endless questions about why things were different between the two peoples. One day she asked why some people had pink skin and others silver and why it mattered. Jake and Lyra explained that it did not matter at all. What mattered was how people treated each other. Luna nodded seriously and said she would make sure everyone knew that. As Luna grew, the relationship between humans and the Empire continued evolving. Trade routes opened, and cultural exchanges became common. Young Celestials came to Earth to study art and music, while humans went to the Empire to learn advanced sciences. The mining station became a symbol of cooperation, visited by diplomats and families alike. Jake was promoted to station commander, while Lyra became the official liaison between the species. They worked side by side, raising Luna and building a future nobody had imagined. On Luna's 5th birthday, the entire station threw a party that lasted 2 days. Humans and Celestials danced together to music that blended both cultures. Children of both species played games Luna had invented that required both emotional intelligence and logical thinking. The Emperor gave a speech saying that his granddaughter represented the best of both worlds. She had human heart and celestial mind, human creativity and celestial discipline. But most importantly, she had the ability to see everyone as family, which neither species had mastered alone. That night, Jake tucked Luna into bed, and she asked him to tell the story of how he met Mama. He had told it hundreds of times, but she never got tired of it. He started with the alarm bells and the massive ship and how he had said, "Hey, sweetie," to the scariest princess in the galaxy. Lyra joined them, sitting on Luna's other side, adding details. Jake forgot, like how her armor had flickered when he touched her, and how his coffee had made her feel funny. They told their daughter about choosing love over fear, and how sometimes the best things happened when different people took chances on each other. Luna's eyes were growing heavy, but she mumbled that when she grew up she wanted to help more different people become friends. Jake kissed her forehead and said she was already doing that just by existing. Lyra sang her to sleep with a celestial lullaby that had learned human words. Later, Jake and Lyra stood at their window watching the stars, just like they had years ago when everything started. The mining station was bigger now, expanded to accommodate all the visitors and new families. Some were human, Some were celestial and some were like them, mixed and creating something new. Jake pulled Lyra close and whispered, "Hey, sweetie," just like he had that first day. She still blushed silver after all these years, and replied, "Yes, darling," with the same warmth that had changed the galaxy. They had proven that love could bridge any gap even between the stars. The Empire still existed, but it was transforming, learning to value connection over conquest. Humans were still stubborn and chaotic, but they were teaching the galaxy that emotions were not weakness but strength. And Luna was growing up in a universe where impossible was just another word for not yet, as they headed to bed. Lyra asked Jake if he ever regretted that their love had complicated everything. He laughed and said that humans were experts at complicated, but it was always worth it for the right person. She agreed and realized that becoming human, or at least partly human, was the best thing that ever happened to her. Their story spread across the galaxy, inspiring others to look past differences and find connection. Some called it naive or impossible, but Jake and Lyra knew better. They had learned that humans possessed the most powerful force in the universe, which was not technology or weapons, but the simple, stubborn refusal to give up on love. And somewhere in the Empire archives, historians recorded that the greatest revolution in 10,000 years of celestial history started with 3 words from a human security chief who looked at the most powerful princess in the galaxy and simply said, "Hey, sweetie,"